Hello, all you lovely people in the group. How are you doing? I promised you some training and here it is. I'm pre-recording it so that I can edit it if I go wrong. I didn't want to do it live and have an internet connection issue or something like that. So I thought I would bring to you today a workshop about fear and what it does to your confidence, because we are a community of people who want to grow in confidence, right? And our fears are very often the thing that gets in our own way when it comes to putting ourselves out there, when it comes to taking the next step in our businesses, or when it comes to taking the next step in our career, or whatever it is that we feel we want to do next. And if we feel held back by something, often there's a fear. I'm going to talk about this in the presentation, but fear makes itself feel much bigger than it really is by being really vague. So I am going to be talking to you about how to actually pinpoint what your fear is, what your fear is of, and why your fear is, which is as important as what your fear is, as we go through the presentation. So I've got some slides ready for you. Let me just share my screen with you all. Here we go. Looky, I put my qualifications on this one just to prove that I do actually have some. I don't often talk about them a lot, but how did I become a fear expert is quite interesting. So my own relationship with fear is it's quite a friendly one. And it's mostly because lots of my early childhood experience would have been quite frightening had it not have been for my mum's ability to turn scary things into fun things. So my mum turned a lot of my fears into fun, and we had lots of adventures. So when I would see things like a look on my mum's face that might be a bit fearful, my mum turned it into a big adventure. So my personal relationship with other people's fears is that something exciting is about to happen rather than something scary is about to happen. Later on, I joined the Air Force and I was working in the world of air traffic control. And lots of people say, isn't air traffic control really stressful? And the job description of what you actually are dealing with, yes, is really quite a stressful job. But what's interesting is most of the people who do the job find it exciting rather than fear-inducing. So stress happens, and there is distress and there is eustress. So there is actually positive stresses. And we can turn the stress that we might feel as fear into something else, and then it becomes a really empowering, really positive fuel source, if you like. So it's something that can propel us forwards rather than holding us back. So my intention for you today is to understand enough about your fear that you can use it as fuel rather than a barrier to hold you back. So what I did in my degree, in my BSc that's on there, is I spoke to lots and lots of skydivers about what they were doing to overcome their fear of jumping out of a plane. And then in my master's degree, I used the information that the skydivers had told me about what they were doing with fear in order to see if I could teach people how to come out of fear and into the exact opposite of fear, which is called flow, which is an amazing state of being where things just feel really natural and amazing, and you can. So that's what I've been doing in the years since, is teaching people how to move from fear into flow and make their life feel much more positive. So that's enough about me. So that work with the skydivers was born out of my sports science training. I was looking at, in sports science, you look at physiology, so the body systems, how the body is working. You look at psychology, which is how the mind is working. You look at biomechanics, which is like the engineering forces. And one of the modules that I took as an option was about motor learning, which is about your nervous system. And it struck me that your nervous system was actually what people are talking about when they're talking about the mind-body connection. And the nervous system is the connection between the psychology and the physiology. So this is what I started to get quite excited about. Could we harness this mind-body connection and reverse it and change it? And how powerful was that connection between the two systems? So I looked at performance anxiety. So people who were really anxious about taking part in competitions and in live events where they were really confident in training. That's what I was looking at, because if people know how to do something, and we're like this in our businesses, aren't we? We know how to do the thing, but it's often going out and doing the thing and telling other people about how good we are at the thing, where we get anxious and we kind of go to pieces a little bit, or we avoid it at all costs. We don't do a live on our page, we don't speak to anybody and tell them about our thing that we're really good at. So essentially, sport is just the metaphor for every way in which we feel anxious. And it's this perceived pressure to perform, because actually outside of the sporting circle, nobody cared a hoot about whether this athlete did their best or not. So the threat was actually just a perceived threat rather than a real life threat. Nobody was putting these athletes into the gladiatorial ring and making them fight lions or anything, or fight to the death. This was just maybe a running event or a squash match or something like that. But it's this perception of pressure. So actually, your fears are internally generated. And that's really powerful to know, because if you generate them, it means you can stop generating them and generate something else instead for yourself. That's really powerful to know. So I wanted to know whether we could do this deliberately, how we could do it deliberately, and what we could do to change it and make it more positive for ourselves. So why do we get scared in the first place? Well, you need to understand a little bit about neurology to understand your fear response, okay? Human beings evolved in a period of time when the world was dangerous. We survived as well as we did as a species because we learnt this method of detecting danger and running away from it. That's essentially our response. And if you look at birds, they see a cat, they jump, they take off. You see a cat and you put a cucumber behind it, it spots the cucumber and it takes off in the air, right? That's how fast this response is. We've all got this same triggering response. We see a danger, we perceive it as a danger, and we run away. And it's hardwired into our system. Now, back in the day, this was triggered by being chased by a bear or falling in quicksand or some other kind of immediate physical threatening danger. And the hardwired response is really tuned for that kind of immediacy of danger. Now, the problem we have in our modern age is that most of the dangers that we actually face, we can't see. So, for example, we've all been living with COVID for some time now. We can't see it, but we know it can do us damage, and we know that it could damage other people, and we don't want to carry it. So it's an unseen threat, and it changes how we behave. And lots of our other unseen perceived threats do exactly the same. And we have some of these fears as inherent fears, so they are part of us. And our fear of rejection, our fear of judgment, and our fear of rejection and failure are real fears, okay? We don't want to fail. We don't want to be kicked out of our community. We don't want to be judged as less than, okay? And these are real fears, and that FOMO is real, okay? Because that hardwiring in our brain that evolved when we were, quite basic human beings, if you like, in our ancestral times, would see being kicked out of our tribe or our community as a life and death situation. Because if we were on our own outside of our community, well, then there were bears that would kill us, and there was quicksand we couldn't get out of on our own, and there might be a tar pit that we couldn't get ourselves out of, or we might die of hunger or exposure because we weren't in the community shelter. So there's lots of reasons why these fears are real. Once we understand them and we understand why they are there, they become much more easy to live with and much more easy to do something about. So this is what fear does to our confidence. It does it to lots of our other emotions as well. But I've used confidence as an example because we're a confidence community, so it made perfect sense, okay? So this is our confidence here on a scale. Let's say this is up here is like 10 out of 10, and down here is like 0 out of 10. And on the other end of our confidence is our fear, all right? So what's on the other end of most of your emotions is some kind of fear. And I've put this yellow arrow here to indicate we're kind of 6 out of 10. And let's say this is our confidence at doing a particular event. Let's say this is our confidence at going live in our group, or this is our confidence of giving a presentation to an audience. And we may be at 6 out of 10 out of that. And while we're just giving our presentation to our group, who are, our friends and things like that, our fear is quite low. And we have this gap between the two called our performance gap, which when we have a nice wide gap like this, we can perform. Now, for some people, the idea of doing the presentation or going live in their group or whatever it is that you are needing to do can make their fear increase. That makes your performance gap actually smaller. So I didn't change where the yellow arrow is here, just the red one, and it makes it kind of all shift a little bit, doesn't it? So the performance gap gets smaller. When your performance gap is smaller, you start to make mistakes. And I will show you why you start to make mistakes in a minute. But your performance gap gets smaller and things feel less comfortable. Once things start to feel less comfortable, then we are more aware of our fear, and our fear can then increase even further. Once our fear becomes higher than our confidence, then we call this a negative performance gap, and this is when we fail to perform. This is when all we want to do is run away. This is when we decide we're not going to go live today, or we're not going to do that presentation, or we're going to cancel that event. This is when our mind goes completely blank and we don't know what to do. We fail to even pick up the phone or respond to an email. So this is when we have basically, in sporting terms, we used to call this choking, where somebody just fails to perform. And we want you to not have this scenario. I would like you to have this scenario. This is my intention for you all, is that you have a really low fear score most of the time. And because you know that your performance is not going to be hindered by your fears, your confidence should automatically increase. So I put this at like 10 out of 10, and your fear at like 9 out of 10. So you've got this increased performance gap. With a huge performance gap like this, everything feels much easier. It feels natural. You can get into a state of flow, which is when everything feels nice and natural and like you're doing the best performance of your life all the time. And you can do whatever you want to do when you have a nice big performance gap like this, because it enables you to try things without the fear of failure being there. And if we are able to try things without there being an associated fear of failure, then we're automatically braver, and, you know, fortune favors the brave, right? We've got to be out there in the arena doing it. Otherwise, nobody knows about our skills and our talents, and we're not getting them out there in the world, and that's not fair to the world. So I've used this expression, mind your head, because we need to change your mind about your fears. And we very often think about our mind as being just in our head, don't we? So I'm going to show you a different way of looking at this, because I don't think that your mind is just in your head. And it's the bit of your mind that isn't in your head that you're going to use to improve your confidence. So I'll show you what I mean by this. So this is obviously a model of a brain, sliced through the middle as if between somebody's eyes. And this pink bit on the outside here, this squashy bit, this is where your intelligence is. This is our newest part of our brain. This is the bit that makes us smart. This is where our logic is, most of our functional processing, lots of our working memory, and our language center. Okay, so this is our intelligence. In the middle, in this kind of peachy pinky or light pinky colored bit in the middle, this is where our emotions come from. This is our emotional center. And all of your emotions start here. So your happiness, your sadness, your frustration, your anger, any emotion that you're feeling starts here. And most of the time, these two parts of your brain function as one. So your thoughts and your emotions can quite happily sit alongside each other, and you can actually think about how you're feeling. So you can identify that maybe today you feel happy, and that feels nice. Okay, so you can have a thought about a feeling. When the feeling, however, that is driving your emotional response is fear, what it essentially does is disconnect these two parts of your brain, and it drives all of your behavior from your emotional center. Okay, so if fear is driving, your intelligence is inaccessible to you. You do not have access to your logic, to good decision making, to your language center, so it can be hard to find the words. To make your logical planning processes, it's hard to plan from a place of fear. Now, if you're running your business from a place of fear, that's going to make things really difficult. It's going to be hard to respond to emails if you can't think of the words. It's going to be hard to put yourself out there in an audience if there's so much fear of judgment that you're going to make mistakes that you end up, getting completely stuck and tongue-tied because you haven't got access to your language, to planning or processing. So we need to do something about that, don't we? So that part of your brain, that inner bit, your emotional part of your brain, is attached to most of your body systems. This is a really simplified version of the nerve root. It's attached by loads of other nerves as well, by the way, but this is the one that makes the most difference to you. This one's called the vagus nerve. And for those of you like me that are really nerdy and like to know where words come from, this comes from the same Latin word root as vagrant, as one that travels. So this is a nerve that travels all around your body. And until recently, we thought that this nerve was mainly controlling your body from your brain. But about 25 years ago, they realized that 80% of the fibers of this nerve go the other way. They actually give information from your body to your brain. And that's brilliant for us because that means we can control our body in order to change our mind. Yes, we can. Right. So let me talk you through it. So this yellow bit is indicating a nerve, the vagus nerve. You may have had that experience where all of a sudden you feel a bit stressed and the background noise that you were almost unaware of suddenly becomes unbearably loud. That's because it increases your hearing. If you think about why we have this response, if you were being chased by a bear, you'd want to have your hearing acuity really high so that you could hear where it was coming from. If there was a physical threat, you'd want to be able to hear it where it was. There's a part that goes to your throat, and that's because it gets us ready to make a really loud screaming noise, an alerting noise to our tribe, to alert other people. And it's the reason our voice can wobble when we feel a bit nervous. We've also got nerve part that goes to our heart, because if we are going to run away, which is essentially what our fear response is, our heart needs to increase its speed so that it can get blood all around our body efficiently so that we can run away. It's also got branches that go to our lungs because we would have to breathe faster in order to provide enough oxygen for our body to run fast. This line here under your lungs is your diaphragm, and under your diaphragm is where lots of your other bodily organs are. So there's a branch that goes to your liver because there's a nice big reservoir of blood in your liver, which can be sent to your legs if you need to run away. There's also lots of sensation, lots of parts of this that go to your gut and your intestinal system because your body wants you to stop digesting if it's in flight mode. Okay, so if it's running away, it needs that energy that you are using to digest to run away, and it sends the blood out of your digestive system again down into your legs so that you can physically run away. We often feel this if it's gentle. We sometimes feel it as butterflies. We can feel it as a sinking feeling in our pit of our stomach. We can feel it as a knot in our stomach. We can feel it as if it's long-term chronic stress, we might feel this as intestinal disorders. So some of our intestinal disorders are related to stress via this network. Okay, so that's the root of the vagus nerve, and this is the nerve that we're going to use to do something about our feelings of fear. Now, fear, why we have fear, is it's a survival mechanism. So your brain is hardwired to identify a threat and run away from it, essentially, or to somehow survive it. So we perceive a threat, and fear is simply our body's response to that perceived threat. Everything that it creates as a response is the fear manifesting itself in our body. And there's three ways it can do it. The first way it will always choose is to flight, so to run away, like a bird taking flight. It wants us to run away. So it powers us up to make physical movements. That's why we have the increased heart rate, the increased breathing rate, the blood diversions out to our arms and our legs so that we can run away. Now, if we're running away from a bear and it's catching up with us, we might have to turn and face the bear, right? It might corner us. We may have to turn and fight. So we need to be a bit brave, don't we? We need to be able to find our power, find our voice. So we've got that link that goes to our alerting voice, but also our kind of roaring back voice. And that can also make us feel a bit aggressive. It can, if it's not targeted, make us feel panicky. And it can make us feel a bit aggressive or angry, maybe towards other people. So if people have got a very flashy temper, often it's because they are frightened about something. Okay, and you will see animals that are feeling frightened becoming aggressive, won't you? You know, you see these videos of, you know, the RSPCA going to rescue an animal. It doesn't understand it's being rescued, and it becomes aggressive towards them. And that's exactly what this response is. The third response is actually in two parts. So we have a two-part freeze response, and it can make us literally stop in our tracks because some wild animals can't see us if we're not moving. So we have a freeze response. The second part of this is when our body perceives that there is so much risk, the likelihood of us dying or being witness to something that is so uncomfortable for us to bear that we don't want to bear witness to it, it causes a type of faint. So it's a kind of blackout, if you like, so that we're not witness to our own demise or our own trauma. And it can mean that when we thought we should have fought back, we become immobile or we check out completely. And you might see this if you've got cats that hunt, and they might put a mouse on the doorstep for you, and it looks like it's dead, and then a few minutes later it gets up, shakes itself off and runs away again. So we do have this two-part freeze response. It can make you go blank in your mind completely because it's shut off your memory and your language center, and it just wants you to stand still. And I've seen lots of young people taking exams go into this freeze response. And lots of people don't understand why they froze when really they should have run away. And this is because the fear has gone on to the next level, if you like. When any of these three stages is occurring, you cannot access your thinking brain. So you can't think of anything smart to say. You don't make good decisions. You can't plan a really good exit strategy or whatever it is. So if you're running your business in a state of fear, it's going to make it very hard to strategize, for example. Okay, so I'm going to take you through 8 steps now that you can do that will make you start to feel better. And these are not, by the way, the only 8 steps. This is just one process. There are loads and loads of things that you can do in order to make yourself feel better if your fear is triggered. The antidote to fear is largely feeling safe again. So all of the methods that I'll show you in terms of overcoming your fear will enable your nervous system to feel safe again. So the first thing we're going to do together is identify a situation or event that is going to make you feel stress, whatever you want to call fear, right? It's stress, it's maybe you call it pressure, maybe you call it anxiety, whatever word sort of sums up for you that feeling of fear, that feeling of maybe it's a fear of not being good enough. That's another one of our fears. So identify a situation that is going to bring around that trigger and imagine it in all its vibrancy. Imagine it that you can see it, imagine you can hear it, imagine you can feel the emotion. This is the important part. So put yourself there in a situation, past or imagined, future, where you might feel your fear. Secondly, I want you to really focus on where you feel something. When we talk about our feelings, all a feeling is an emotion that is expressed in the body in a way you can detect it. So a feeling is what your body does as a response to an emotion. So where are you feeling it? Sometimes it's in the pit of your stomach. Sometimes it might be in your chest. I've had people feel it in their fingertips. Where do you feel it? It's really important that you understand at this point that fear is a feeling, not a thought. So you cannot think your way out of this sensation. You can only feel your way out. So making logical plans and creating an action planning chart is not going to work to overcome your fear. You can only feel your way out. Really important you remember that. Okay, feeling it? Marvelous. Now I want you to try and move the feeling. And it can be quite tricky to move the feeling unless you're practiced at it. So it doesn't have to move far. So let's say this feeling is in the pit of your stomach. Just try moving it up 2 or 3 inches. Try moving it forwards or up and down, left or right, up and down diagonal. Maybe take it out of your body. Just see if you can move that feeling just a little bit, because this is starting to change your hardwired response to the trigger. Let's see if you can. Step 4 is to reappraise the feeling. Give it a different label, okay? So you So you often will feel excited, and excitement and fear have actually got the same neurological footprint. The only difference is our perception of it. And because our perception of it is different, if we detect it and decide that it's excitement, the hormone that we produce is called dopamine. And if we feel it as fear, it's cortisol, which is a stress hormone. So we get a different response if we decide that it's excitement. A few months ago, I was driving along, for those of you that know Eastbourne, I was driving along the Beachy Head Road, nice windy road, and suddenly from nowhere there was a hailstorm. I'm driving along with my daughter in the car next to me. We come up near Bell2 Lighthouse, and there's a lovely sweeping right-hand turn with quite a significant drop off to the left-hand side into a field. As I turned the car steering wheel to turn right and follow the road around, the wheels didn't grip the road because of the layer of hailstones that was on the surface. And I felt like we were tipping over towards the steep drop off on the left-hand side. I knew that if we went off, we would likely roll the car because it's quite a steep drop and the car's quite high-sided. So I sort of yanked on the steering wheel even more to make the right-hand turn. The car ended up skidding across the road into the oncoming traffic. Fortunately, nothing was coming. And we came to rest on a bank with our front wheels in the air, a back wheel sticking out into the oncoming traffic, and the car beached on a bank at the side of the road on the right-hand side. My first response was to turn to my daughter in the passenger seat and say, "Wow, wasn't that exciting?" Because I was trying to do for her what my mum had done for me and turned scary events into exciting ones. So then I had to continue, if you like, with the adventure theme and say, wow, I hope somebody stops and helps us soon. And then had to get out of the car and stop the traffic and, wait for someone to rescue us and this kind of thing. But it was that reappraisal of the feeling. And this is one of the things that the skydivers were doing. They weren't frightened of jumping out of a plane. They're excited about it. And deciding that sensation you're feeling, oh, here's this excitement, has real power. So before exams, I'll tell people I love an exam, and I do, because rather than feeling nervous, I decide I'm excited about it. And because I decide I'm excited, I am excited because we create our own emotions, don't we? So if you can create excitement rather than fear, you're onto a winner. Okay, the next thing I want you to do is smile. Your smile is your superpower because your brain can't tell if your smile is real or not. Doesn't matter if it reaches your eyes or not, doesn't matter. Your facial muscles are very near to your brain, so their signaling to your brain is really quick. And if you were being chased by a bear or your life was genuinely at risk, you would not be smiling about it. So your smile, if you like, is immediate switchboard response into your brain to say, if she's smiling about it, there cannot be any risk of danger. Okay, I must have misread that. This is absolutely fine. And so your smile is your superpower. The other cool thing about your smile is that if you smile at other people, because we've got mirror neurons in the back of our head, because we're a tribal community, social species, other people can't fail to smile back at you. It's our natural instinct. You actually have to suppress it to not smile back at somebody that smiles at you. And if you then see somebody else smiling at you, it reinforces that you must both be okay. And this can be seen even in babies who are not yet old enough to realize that they are a separate person, or that they have a face. But if you hold a baby kind of at sort of close proximity, arm's distance from your face, and smile and make O shapes with your mouth, a very small baby will copy you. They're mirroring you, even though they've got no idea that they've got a face of their own. They haven't got a concept of that yet. So this facial recognition is really powerful, and it's hardwired at a very instinctive level. The next thing I want you to do, step 6, is to re-engage your thinking. You have to force the thinking to restart, okay? So asking yourself a logical question will force that reconnection of these two parts of your brain. Ask yourself a thinking question, something like, what could I do to stop myself feeling afraid? Or, I wonder why it is that I'm as bothered about this as I am. Or, I wonder what it really is that I'm actually worrying about. And start that process of reconnecting those two parts of your brain deliberately. Okay, number 7 is from the work of Amy Cuddy, and I will share some YouTube links of her work. It's really fascinating. And she looked at the fact that in the animal kingdom, if animals wanting to make themselves appear confident, they make themselves big. Okay, you see this, you just have to think about a peacock with its huge display in order to know this to be true. You see the great apes hammering on their chests, lifting themselves up to make themselves really big. Animals will stand on their back legs to make themselves appear more ferocious. Making yourself big is a display of how confident you are. So standing like a superhero, or even putting your arms up in the V shape that we do when we're proud, will make you feel more confident. And standing in this superhero pose, we call it power posing, either with your hands in fist or with your hands open on your hips there, like Wonder Woman has. I've gone for the classics here in the pictures, not the modern age ones. Standing in these postures has been shown to increase testosterone and reduce cortisol. So testosterone is what you need in your body to feel assertive, but cortisol is your stress hormone. Now, very often with people who have high testosterone and high cortisol, they will be what we call reactive. So they will be possibly aggressive rather than assertive, because they've got stress and fear behind their testosterone. If you've got high testosterone and low cortisol, you can be very measured and still be assertive, but without feeling panicky at the same time. And their studies show that you can do this for just 2 minutes and it will make a massive difference to how you're actually feeling. And lots of people do this like in the toilets before they go for a job interview. Even imagining yourself in this position will have some effect because of how our imagery works in our brain. So standing like a superhero, the key elements of this are holding your chest nice and open, because it's the exact opposite, if you like, of curling up like a hedgehog when we're feeling threatened. So if you're bearing your heart, it's a demonstration of your confidence, your openness. Keeping your head kind of level so your chin isn't jutting out, but it's kind of tucked in, and the back of your neck there is long. So there's no compression of the nerves that are coming out of your brain stem. And you are standing with your feet hip width apart, so you are balanced. So feeling physically balanced helps you to feel more emotionally balanced. So this is a really cool position to stand in. When I'm teaching in the college, I make all of my students stand like a superhero for 2 minutes before they are allowed to do a presentation to me, because I want them to feel this amazing, assertive, high testosterone, low stress, enjoyment sensation of doing a presentation, rather than coming at it panicky and scared and messing it up. Now, the 8th point is breathing. And I've been told loads of times about the power of taking a few deep breaths and all this kind of stuff for years and years and years, as part of mindfulness training, as part of sports training and all kinds of stuff. But I never really got it until, as part of my yoga teacher training, we had to do pranayama, which is breathing exercises, and we had to log them every day for the 10 months of our yoga training. And it was only when I started dedicating myself to a specific breathing practice and trying different specific breathing practices for an amount of time that I really started to notice the difference. The difference now is that if I start one of these breathing processes, my nervous system calms down almost immediately. It took practice to get there, but it's a surefire way of calming your nervous system down. And I'll tell you why before we practice it. When your body wants you to speed up and run away, it increases your rate of your breathing, and it increases the pattern of your breathing in a particular way. So when somebody is running in a state of fear, they're taking a big swallowing breath in and they're almost snorting the breath out. By breathing with an extended exhalation, it's the exact opposite of this process. So breathing with an extended exhalation will make you feel calm, but going from your normal erratic breathing to a state of breathing with an extended exhalation can feel uncomfortable. So what we do is we balance our breathing first, and then we extend our exhalation. So in order to balance your breathing, your in-breath and your out-breath have to be the same duration. And I've put 4 seconds. And it's really whatever is comfortable to you. It doesn't need to be a big breath, by the way. There's nothing particularly important about taking a big breath, because that can actually sometimes trigger an anxious response. But just breathing gently and slowly are the key elements to this. And if we're wearing our masks in modern times, we can breathe gently through our mask and it will make no difference whatsoever. So balancing your breathing, just take a couple of breaths breathing in for 4 seconds and out for 4 seconds. Through your nose or your mouth, it really doesn't matter. Just breathing like that to balance it. And if your breath is not smooth, then it's just worth spending a few minutes doing breathing in a balanced way just to smooth it out, so it feels like a gentle movement of your breath going in and out. If it feels more jagged, then just spend time trying to smooth it out first before you then go on to an extended exhalation. So we'll just do 1 or 2 of those together with an extended exhalation now. So just breathe in for a count of 4. And then try and extend that exhalation for 6 with your nose or your mouth, doesn't really matter. That's lovely. And you may have been able to hear my breathing. So one of the things that people who practice yoga will often do, it's called an ujjayi breath. And it's kind of, if you imagine that you are like misting up a window, doing that kind of breath, but with your mouth closed, and it makes a kind of noise at the back of your throat. It's actually vibrating on that vagus nerve. So I'll do another one just so you can hear it. So it's a normal breath in, and then a ujjayi breath out. So you may be able to hear it's like a wind at the back of my throat. They sometimes call it the ocean breath because it sounds like the ocean coming in and out. Okay. And there's a magic 9th step, which I'm going to talk to you about, which is a bonus step because it's an 8-step process. So the bonus step I want to tell you about is having a song that inspires you. So sometimes we call this our walk-on song, and I've got a sporting background. So the darts players, the snooker players, the boxers come on to a particular song. Lots of sports teams will have a song playing in their changing room before they come out. That is their walk-on song. It gets them upbeat and ready. Now, the reason that music is so powerful is because it engages both parts of our brain together, especially if it has a strong emotional component for you. So my personal walk-on song is from The Greatest Showman. It's This Is Me. And I love it because it makes me feel like, look out, because here I come, right? It's my song. It feels like it's me. It has an emotional component to it, so I feel something when I listen to it. I'm singing the words in my own head, and I'm getting the phrasing and the timing right, which means there's a cognitive component to it as well. So my thinking brain and my emotional brain are both activated together. If I'm feeling fear, remember they disconnect. I want them to reconnect. So listening to music that creates a connection between the two is really powerful. You can listen to it through headphones, you can listen to it out loud, you can hum the song in your head. Doesn't matter how, as long as the music makes you feel something or the song makes you feel something, it will have a powerful impact on your fear. So you need to practice these things. But I wanted to remind you about what a state is. We talk about getting ourselves in the right state, don't we? Oh, I was in the right state, this thing happened and I got all emotional about it or whatever. But a state is just a way of describing how we feel. And a state is not a fixed way of being. It's temporary. That's why it's called a state, all right? Not a permanent state. So in any given day, you go through a range of emotions. So you don't feel the same all day. So you're happy, you're sad, you're bored, you're frustrated, you get a bit angry, you're happy again, you go in and out, in and out. And your fear is exactly the same. But fear makes itself feel bigger than it really is. So you might actually only feel frightened for a matter of seconds, but your brain will like latch onto it, okay? And that's why one piece of criticism has such a big impact when 10 bits of praise will have less of an impact. The reason that the criticism is like Velcro is because it latches into your fear system. The reason the praise washes off you is because it relates to the other system, which is called your rest and digest system, okay? So we have like this Velcro and Teflon effect when it comes to fear and praise. Again, those states, by managing our state, we can reverse that feeling. We can actually take more pleasure from the praise and take more pleasure from our positive experience than we can get hooked on this fear. And fear does make itself feel big by being really vague. It's, you might just feel frightened of something and have this response, this stress response. You're never really sure what it is that you're actually frightened of. So let's say this is a fear of something like a spider. What specifically is it that you're actually frightened of it? Is it like that it might bite you, that it might sting you, that it might jump, that it scuttles, that it looks funny, that it's got hairy legs? Like, what actually is it? And when you start thinking about what it actually is, what specifically about it, and whether that's likely to happen or whether that's really that frightening, it starts to reduce. So if you feel yourself getting slightly triggered, don't try and stop it without experiencing it. Just try and actually be curious about it and think, actually, what is it I'm actually worried about? And we fear often the judgment of others, but what is it we're actually frightened of about the judgment of others? Actually, if I put myself out there, most of the time people are pleasant about it. Most of the time people appreciate the help that I'm giving them. Most of the time people are okay with it. And I'm worried that people might judge my dodgy hairdo, and actually everyone's got lockdown hair at the moment. I've had to go out with me embroidery scissors. It doesn't matter. Nobody really cares about my hair. Nobody really cares about the message that I'm giving or something like that. I don't need to lose sleep over somebody else's opinion that I can't change. Once I realize the fear is not actually that great, and there's no physical harm behind it, then I don't need to continue to experience it. So I can take myself into a different state much more readily. And you can do it too. So all you need to do is practice these 8-step processes so that you can feel like this. I've written them down here. Oh, sorry, the practice with all these techniques, because the more you practice them, the more they will come naturally when you need them. This is the 8-step process with a magic 9th step on it for you so that you can refresh yourself with it. So feel the trigger, imagine the trigger, whatever makes you frightened, feel it. Where do you feel it? Really notice it. Where is the sensation? Move the sensation. Decide the sensation isn't fear, that it's excitement or something else more pleasant. Smile to start washing it out. Ask yourself a thinking question is step 6. Step 7 is to stand like a superhero in your power pose, standing totally in your power. 8 is to breathe in that slow, controlled way. And 9 is to power yourself with your walk-on song. So putting them all together is where the magic happens. It's not just doing one of these things at a time, it's doing them all together. Okay, so don't forget to feel your fear, master it, and bring your brilliance, because fear is just an emotion like all the others. So hopefully that's been interesting for you and has given you something to think about, some things to go away and practice. Practice these things on small fears, on small trivial things that worry you just a little bit, so that when you need to bring them for the big events, they're much more practice and you're not just relying on trying to remember the 8-step process when you've got your big fears to deal with. So use them as a matter of course, use them as kind of daily practices, because the more you use them, the more their method of working becomes second nature to your nervous system. Your nervous system learns a new way of being with enough practice, okay? And practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. Now, you've probably created a fear structure that feels like it's permanent because you've practiced it so much since you were really tiny, okay? By the way, you didn't come into the world frightened of other people's opinions. You only came into the world frightened of 2 things, the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. Now that you're worried about all these other stuff, it's something that you've learned how to do. So you can unlearn it and you can learn something else instead. So you can unlearn it. So keep practicing until this new process is your permanent one and it replaces the old fear process. And I am really excited to hear how you get on with this and what positive experience it brings you, because I promise that it will make positive changes for you, everybody. Okay, have a lovely rest of your day and let me know how you get on, and I'll see you all soon. Okay, guys? Bye.